and welcome to another episode of Gossip Finance. I am your host, Alacius Inger.
And I'm Duncan Sandlin. How's everybody doing? How's it going, Lacey?
Good. And, I think we should jump right into it because it's been quite a week in the news.
Yeah, so the first thing we have to jump into, everybody, is the debt ceiling. Passed the House and the Senate. Biden signed it. Then he did his first Oval Office address since he's been president about this, and so we'll look at a little bit of this, but there's going to be some clips in here. This is from I think I stole this from CBS New York. Yeah.
I know bipartisanship is hard, and unity is hard, but we can never stop trying.
President Biden took a victory lap, hailing his bipartisan debt ceiling agreement that he brokered with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
No one got everything they wanted, but the American people got what they needed. We averted an economic crisis, an economic collapse.
But indeed, those who didn't get what they wanted included some Democrats, incensed that the president even negotiated with Republicans.
This is about paying the ransom to a bunch of hostage takers. And that is not how we should run this government.
The bill essentially freezes domestic spending for 2 years and hikes Pentagon spending by 3%. But that was not enough for some GOP hardliners.
The people who negotiated this, I wouldn't let them buy me a car.
Senator Schumer fired back at the critics.
The hard-right MAGA Republicans wanted to cut critical investments by as much as 30%, cut all these vital programs by 30%. As we say in Brooklyn, NFW.
No fucking way. Chuck Schumer, no fucking way.
Hey, listen, that's my guy right there. New York.
Gotta lean into my New York accent so thick that you'll think I'm in line at Zabar's.
Please don't come here and do that.
I won't.
I don't want to have to scrape you off the sidewalk.
Get my ass kicked. I gotta tell you though, I kind of. So here's the deal. The Republicans didn't get a ton out of this, but the one big thing they did get was they did get some spending cuts in the form, not really cuts, in the form of work requirements for what's called SNAP, or the Supplemental Nutritional Program, right? So it's food stamps, for those of you guys who don't know what it is. So this is for poor people that need food, right? The work requirements, I think if you're over 52 or 54, something like that, you're exempt. If you're a veteran, you're exempt. If you were in foster care, you're exempt. You can look it up what all the exemptions are. But for the rest of you, you're going to have to now show that you worked every month. And you got to show that you worked at least 20 hours a week or were in school or something. Otherwise, they'll take away your food stamps. And it'll take you at least 3 months to get them back because you'll have to reapply.
How would that work for somebody that is like self-employed or, 1099?
You got to have to report it in. And that's the thing that's the question is.
Like, how would you report that monthly? Like, I understand reporting it, and if you're paying your taxes, you're sort of reporting it on an annual basis. Do you just have to file your taxes or something?
I don't know.
But that's not a monthly thing.
But that's the problem, Lacey. I don't know. And the problem is remember, we covered this last week. They tried to do the same shit with Medicaid in Arkansas. And what happened? They just kicked a bunch of people off the rolls. And most of them were elderly people that didn't even know. And then when they surveyed people, 70% of people in Arkansas didn't even know that was the law, that they had to report. And what you forget is the other thing about this is it doesn't increase people working. It doesn't increase employment at all. It doesn't do anything to help unemployment or employment. What it does do is it kicks these people off the rolls, mostly people that don't know about it or aren't being able to report. And it costs more than just to give these people the money. Because you got to hire people, you got to set up an office, you got to set up a website, you got to set up a way for them to report it, you got to set up people to check it. Right? And then what ends up happening is when you kick these people off, you create more economic downturn, more homelessness, more problems. So then more and more people end up getting onto the roll the following year. So you're increasing now the amount of food stamps you have to give out. Plus it costs more because you got to have people to monitor it. I mean, it's basically paying somebody trash your house. And then wondering why it's never getting clean. I mean, it makes no sense. And so here's the other thing about it that Warren made a good point of was there's no reason to have a debt ceiling debate. It's an artificial problem. They raised it every time under Trump, the 3 times they had to. Nobody fucking said a thing. Right? This is about, we lost, we want to put pressure on the current administration to try and get some concessions that we otherwise wouldn't be able to get. So it is hostage taking. And what are we going to do? We're going to throw the U.S. economy into chaos. And by essence, the world economy. Right?
Really, it's just a lot of toying with the American people in order to
cut food stamps,
kind of fight with each other and make each other look bad. It's really kind of ridiculous.
Well, right, and that's the point. And then at the end, what did they get? They cut food stamps by adding work requirements. They're going to end up cutting from food stamps. That's it. That's all they got for that whole debacle. And they put our credit at risk, the U.S. or the world's economy at risk. Now, here's this guy. This is the Majority Report. We've seen them before with Sam Cedar and Emma Vigilant, but they got this guy, Nathan Tankus. I got to tell you, I'm jealous of them. Why can't we get interviews like this? We got to up our game some. We need to get some of these guys on. But he's going to talk about why the debt ceiling thing it was just badly handled and is just kind of a stupid thing to begin with. And he's going to go through a little brief history. And I thought this was really good, just to give everybody some context of why this was stupid. So Nathan's here in the middle.
To Obama getting elected, I'll get back to that. But then in 2013, after Obama wins, the Republicans are weakened. The sort of like Tea Party energy wave is in a complicated, different place. And Biden looks at that, remembers that period, and thinks, well, the debt ceiling increases then were mostly clean debt ceiling increases. There was like a little bit of like putting congressmen's wages into escrow, congresspeople's wages into escrow. There was a little bit of like, let's create a bipartisan conference on the debt, blah, blah, blah. But for the most part, they did not successfully use the debt ceiling as a chip to get cuts. That wasn't what they were able to do with it. And other things were going on, like the government shutdown, but they weren't able to use the debt ceiling as this big hostage feature 2013. And so that's the last time Biden's really, really thought about these issues. So Biden's thought is, well, let's just do 2013 again. And that's where this idea of not doing any negotiations come from. If we just say we won't negotiate, that's a position of strength. They'll fold over like they did in 2013. And that's really the core issue is this, that we're in a very different political situation, that Trump happened, that the transformation of the Republican Party under Trump, and that Republicans don't feel weak the way they did in 2013. And also you didn't have very different style of Republicans who could more readily cede to business pressure, and there was business pressure to cede to. That was fundamentally what our core problem is it's a playbook that has not paid attention to how the terrain has changed.
So I think he's made a phenomenal point there, which is basically Biden was still sitting there thinking, oh, it's 2013, right? And he's still thinking it's the old way of doing things. And he's not thinking about, well, no, the MAGA Republicans are a whole different kind of crazy than the Tea Party people were. The Tea Party people were all about economic things. The MAGA Republicans are all about cultural nonsense. They don't give a shit if they ruin the economy. They don't give a shit if they piss off billionaire, right, or businesses. They don't really care. That's not where their money comes from. So it's kind of a whole different animal, right? And the other thing about it is I think the better point is when the Democrats lost the House last year in 2022, if I were Biden back then, I'd have gotten a whole team of finance experts and economists and lawyers together, and I'd have sat them in a room and said, you guys need to start thinking about how we're going to deal with the debt ceiling and how we can get around this shit so that they can't hold this against us. Because if he'd have started thinking about it last year, a year and a half ago, we wouldn't have been in this problem. They'd have had some solution. They could have pulled out the 14th Amendment sooner. Because the problem with pulling it out when people were talking about it was at that point it was pretty much too late. And you can argue that. And I know people are online are going to sit there and go, well, you guys don't understand and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, fine, then email us and we'll have you on the show and you can explain it. We offer it all the time and nobody ever takes us up. So you're welcome. You can come on and do it. But that's what I think was the ultimate issue. But I want to go to this last clip because this is some of the bugger Republicans were bitching about. We're not cutting enough from poor people. And then Bernie Sanders kind of clapped back.
We're not cutting enough from poor people.
They don't say it like that.
Sure, but they want to spend all of their energy making sure that rich people don't have to have one less Ferrari, but those poor people, if they have too many food stamps.
Well, you got to remember, though, from their perspective, it's because they're lazy. That's why they're poor. It's a moral thing, right?
Right. And so clearly the person who's got, their plethora of Ferraris.
It's not a
they're good people.
Yeah, it's not a systemic thing where we barely tax the rich, we tax the shit out of the poor, and we take away food stamps and shit like that from them. That's not what's causing them to be poor. It can't be that at all. It's a moral issue. Anyway, so let's just listen to this real quick. I stole this from the Young Turks, but we'll just listen to these two real quick. Mike Lee and Bernie Sanders. Mike Lee is such a punk.
Big of a miscarriage of justice as exists in this country, while Republicans claim that this is a big victory for Republicans. Meanwhile, the Democrats are doing everything they can to hide their excitement over this deal.
My friend from Utah will be happy to know that not everybody in the Democratic caucus thinks this is a great victory for President Biden. Madam President, deficit reduction cannot just be about cutting programs that working families, the children, the sick, the elderly, and the poor depend upon. They are the easy targets. You see, they don't have any lobbyists here. They don't make big campaign contributions. They don't wine and dine members of the House or the Senate. They're an easy target. We can cut programs that working class and low-income people depend upon. But when it comes to demanding that the billionaire class and profitable corporations start paying their fair share of taxes, when it comes to reining in out-of-control military spending and taking on the very powerful military-industrial complex, well, that is another story. That's not something...
So, he's right. I don't know what else to say. He's absolutely right. No problem cutting taxes on the rich. No problem doing that. And you know why? Because the poor don't have a lobby. Because they don't have any money. There's no homeless lobby.
Yeah, that's who the real representatives are, really.
Well, that's the point is that if you're going to be... I honestly think you should have to take a psychological exam that shows that you really want to be a civil servant before you become... Because you have to be a cop or to be a nurse. You have to do, if you want to be a government attorney, in most cases, you have to show that you are a civil servant. You want to work for the CIA? You want to work for the Secret Service? You got to do all that shit. But fucking, you could become a congressman and just do it all for the money. I do think it's funny because I'm just going to mention this real quick. And anybody who wants to debate me on this, I think this would be a fun one to do. Email is below. Just email us. So I looked this up. Last year, 2022, the wealthiest 1% in America made, just in wealth, growth on their wealth, not income, just growth on their wealth, $6.5 trillion. With a T, trillion. Okay. We talked about this a little bit about a wealth tax. What if, and I'm just thought hypothetically, what if we taxed 20% on that? That would be $1.3 trillion. They'd still get to keep $5.2 trillion, right? So they still get to keep most of it. We just take 20%. Well, the total amount that the government took in taxes, in tax revenue last year was $3.3 trillion. So that is like a 30% bump increase in tax revenue just from that 1%. Talking about less than 1 million people, maybe, that made that money. Well, less than 3 million, sorry, that made that money. If we take that little 20%, they still get 5.2 trillion. We just took 1.3 for the people, right? Now, let's say we just took that money and instead of spending it on things like education, safety net programs or anything like that, right? Let's say we just took that 1.3 trillion and every year we threw it at the national debt and deficit. Well, the deficit was about 500 billion, so you'd still get to throw about 0.8 trillion at the national debt, right? Which is 31 trillion, right? At that rate, we could pay off the national debt in less than 35 years?
Yeah. But oh no, those rich people, if they have less than 5 Ferraris, they will die.
Well, I'm sorry, you might have to give up having the 8th house, the 8th McMansion in, God knows where. But I was just thinking about, hey, if Republicans really give a shit about being fiscally responsible and getting rid of the debt, instead of cutting food stamps, which isn't going to fucking do anything or make us any money, why don't we raise revenue? That might actually pay some shit off.
Yep.
That was just my theory on that. So, anyway, moving on from the debt ceiling before we bore everybody to death. This one will be really exciting. Oil prices.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of excited about this one.
Okay, this is actually going to be a good one. So, for those of you who are interested in investing in stuff, you do need to pay attention to what oil does because it affects all the other sectors directly.
Absolutely, it impacts so much. So when there's news in oil, you should be interested.
Yeah, it's front page news for finance. So OPEC met, I think it was last week. So OPEC is the oil and petroleum exporting countries.
But let's pause right there and reiterate for the audience here. You hear anything about them, and you should be listening.
Yeah, OPEC. You hear
whenever OPEC meets, you need to pause and try to figure out what's going on because it impacts so much in the world of investment. I mean,
yeah.
Obviously, if you have any investments directly in oil, but even so many investments that don't on the surface look like they have to do with that,
right?
They'll be impacted.
Right. So, and part of this is OPEC is basically the oil cartel. No, I mean that's it's even a nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
It's basically if you're into comic books, if you imagine like the Legion of Doom meeting in their secret hideout, that's kind of what OPEC is. I mean they're scary people. Basically, it's Saudi Arabia, Russia, Venezuela. I forget who the others are. Is Argentina still in there? I don't know. But it's like 6 or 7 of these major countries. Yeah, but they're all the countries you'd be like, these are all countries we could potentially be at war with at any time. Right? So, but this affects the gas prices at the pump. It affects food prices. It affects everything. So anyway, OPEC met, and then kind of this is Reuters. They're doing a little special on this, but they wanted to sort of tackle in what the OPEC meeting was kind of about and what happened. So here we go.
Hello and welcome to Sectors Up Close. I'm David Pollard. Today we're talking about the outlook for crude oil markets, and my guest is Jim Mitchell, head of America's oil analysts at Refinitiv. Well, it could be a big week for those crude oil markets. OPEC and its allies, including Russia, meet in Vienna on June the 4th to decide on their output policy. The group, known as OPEC Plus, agreed in early April to increase crude oil production cuts. That surprise announcement helped push up prices by about $9 to above $87 per barrel over the days that followed, but Brent prices have since lost those gains.
Okay, so, hang on. Okay, so when you guys see this Brent, I see Brent. Brent is like S&P 500 for oil. This is the index for oil, right? So this is what the benchmark that everybody looks at. So this is the futures market that they did. So OPEC back in April, they decided they were all going to cut the amount of barrels of oil they were going to release every month, right? So they were going to do to try and squeeze it and make the price go up, right? So we're going to squeeze supply so it doesn't meet demand, so the price has to go up, right? And as you can see, it worked, but not for very long. And then it shot down again. Now, what they'd like, ideally, is to go back to where they were $120 a barrel last year. But now they're down to $72, $79. So they're down almost $50 a barrel, which hurts them a lot financially. So that's what part of what OPEC's talking about is this has not been a good trend for them.
Since lost those gains. And in the very latest Reuters poll, analysts see Brent holding below $90 a barrel throughout this year as economic headwinds set in. So will OPEC Plus cut again? And what could it all mean for crude prices ahead? Well, joining me now to discuss just that is Jim Mitchell, head of America's oil analysts at Refinitiv. Welcome to Sectors Up Close, Jim. Now, Saudi Arabia has warned it wants to inflict pain on short sellers, what it calls an ouch moment. That must be a pretty clear signal of an output cut at this meeting, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't it high drama in the market right now? It's outstanding. With the speculators taking pretty sizable short positions, well, I will say they have been decreased in the last 3 weeks. And actually, open interest in total has decreased in the last 3 weeks. Those short positions have drawn the ire of, as you mentioned, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman.
Okay, so let's look at this graph real quick. Go back. This is not a price graph. This is a volume. Okay, so it's the volume of people that are buying what are called futures and options. But the reason this has gone up is the people are buying what are called shorts. They're betting against the price of oil going up. They're betting that it'll go down. And that has increased, especially since April, May, when the prices started going down again. And so that's really pissing off OPEC. So when they talked about Saudi Arabia and him doing what's called an ouch moment, they're doing it. So Saudi Arabia is now going to decrease by even more. They're going to decrease by another 1 million barrels a day. Now, the idea is this will drive up gas prices, the fuel oil prices, right? So they're trying to sit like right now, I think gas is $3.50 something a gallon at the tank on average throughout the U.S. Ideally for Saudi Arabia, just from your perspective as an investor, for Saudi Arabia, ideally you'd be over $5. And I'll throw this as a fun book out. There's a really interesting book called Blood for Oil that was written by a former CIA officer who worked in Saudi Arabia in the 80s and 90s. His name was Robert Baer. He doesn't tell you anything like classified, but he tells you sort of the outlook. And they did a study and they figured for every 50 cents you spent on gas, 25 cents of that went to the Saudi royal family. Right? And half of that, like 12 cents of that, went to drugs, booze, hookers. That's how much they were blowing. So every time you spend $1 on gas, a quarter of it went to get some Saudi prince stoned and laid.
Oh, man.
There are lots of princes in Saudi Arabia. But But just to give you a sense, so that's kind of what's going on. So right now, Saudi Arabia is going to do that. Now, if they succeed, let's say it works. It might not, because Biden right now, we have replenished our petroleum reserves. So he could open them again. It wouldn't be a big issue to keep the price down, artificially down. On top of that fact, if you do that and prices go up, do consumers continue to consume at the same amount, or do they shuttle back, right, and consume a little bit less? And it's hard to guess now with millennials and Gen Z whether or not we go more frugal, because there's an issue. But even if he succeeds, then what's going to happen is inflation is going to start to climb back up again. The Fed might want to raise rates, which is going to cause more economic problems. And we're going to have to recede anyway at some point. So I don't know that this is a long-term solution for the Saudi. He might see like a dead cat bounce on this sort of thing, but I don't see it going much further than that. That's just my speculation. I could be wrong. That's just my guess. But I think it's kind of
we're going to find out.
Yeah, I think OPEC's lost a lot of its power, and especially as countries are moving more towards electric. We still burn a lot of gas for electricity, but we have a lot of other sources, and battery power has become a much more, especially with lithium and stuff, is much more efficient than it used to be. So we don't have to burn as much to get the same amount of energy output that we used to. And a lot of states have, like, I live in Oregon, it's, most of my power, like 70% of the power I get comes from hydroelectric.
Right.
Because we live near a massive river. The Willamette River. So, anyway, any thoughts on the oil stuff? Or?
No. I mean, I guess I'll just be curious to see if your prediction is right and to see kind of how this plays out.
Yeah.
I was just remembering back to sort of just early pandemic, pre-pandemic days when OPEC met and the Saudi Arabia decided they wanted to have a pissing match with the Russians and made all of the oil prices go crazy. And
yeah,
I'm going to say I made some money on that. I was like, hey, there's some oil stocks there. They're on sale. Awesome. Pick those up. Now they've shot back up. So, I'm just kind of curious to see if your prediction on this one is right in particular. Or...
Well, it's a short-term bet, right? If you're doing a long-term buy, I don't foresee oil going up a ton in the long term. I see it's probably going to stay pretty level. I think anymore, a lot of it's baked into the cake. And as, like you said, more of Europe and Japan and South Korea and the United States, we move towards electric fleets of cars. More people get solar on their houses and batteries and stuff. I mean, there's going to be less and less consumption. Yeah. And even then, we have a ton of oil reserves in this country that we could tap at any freaking time we wanted. We just don't.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, that's strategic.
People in general don't want to be held hostage by oil prices, so they're looking to, alternate and greener sources, so to speak.
Well, right, because it's cheaper.
Right. Some are environmentalists, but everybody cares about their wallet.
Right. It's cleaner, it's cheaper. Everybody likes that, right?
They're like, cleaner and cheaper, that's a win.
Yeah. Plus, you get to be snobby with your friend. Yeah, my house is solar. I pay less than you do, and I'm not ruining the environment. Dale. I don't know who Dale is, but...
But now Dale apparently is ruining the environment. So if your name is Dale, please comment below about how that can offend you.
Sorry, Dale. So, anyway, let's move on. Okay. So Pride is this month. Yay! Yay, Pride. There's a lot of, like, the conservatives have been attacking gay rights and trans rights and all that, and there've been over 400 anti-trans bills just this year that the Republicans have pushed. They just banned trans affirming.
A lot of energy into that, man. They're putting a lot of energy into that.
Yeah, it's funny too because like you think trans people, and it's such a marginalized group, and they're only like what 3 or 4 million of them in the U.S. Maybe. They're not that many of them. They're less than 1%.
Right. I mean, in the whole scope of things, that's.
Yeah.
I mean, plenty of people, but comparatively, it's a low number, right?
Right. Well, 3 million is still a big.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, 3 million is still a big number of people, but it's not big enough for them to really have a lot of power or do anything. They're
not enough for the Republicans to be worried in any way. Not that they should be worried anyway, but yeah, the amount of energy they're pouring into.
Well, yeah. Anyway, their media campaign and stuff. I mean, I don't know if it's worked that much. We're going to discuss it here, but because we did the Bud Light thing, and they got all upset about that and tried to boycott it, and their whole thing is we're going to boycott all these companies that don't meet our cultural agenda when it comes to gay people and black people and whatever. But here's a quick story from I think it's just NBC on this, on companies and how that's all affecting them.
Is Pride Month, and there's no missing its kickoff. Rainbow flags are everywhere. There are t-shirts and hats. Apple has a watch. Absolute Vodka has a special bottle.
Companies have got more involved in Pride as a sign of how the whole culture is changing.
But this year, the landscape has shifted.
You are going to get rainbow vomit on everything across corporate America.
Some corporations stepping into a fierce fight over transgender issues. It plays out in state houses.
When you bow your heads in prayer, you see the blood on your hands.
And on cable news.
The same people who encourage minors to have life-altering hormones and surgery on their genitalia and even begin transitioning without parental consent, they have done and are doing enormous damage to young people.
Target moved its Pride Month merchandise, including a transgender-friendly bathing suit, to the back of some of its stores after customer backlash.
Hey, these are, naked people in shirts.
Its stock price dropped more than 15% in 2 weeks.
I got some Bud Lights for us.
Bud Light marketed a customized can featuring transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney, triggering an outcry. Sales dropped nearly 30%. There are calls to boycott Kohl's because of its Pride-themed baby clothes, and North Face, the outdoor company, as well.
We like to call this little tour the Summer of Pride.
Transgender issues still seem strange and scary to people.
20 states have passed bans on transgender medical treatment for minors.
Does this very angry debate cast a shadow over some of the progress that has been made?
I think everyone is aware that issues that seemed to be settled just a few years ago are up for grabs again.
Pride organized...
Well, anyways, so it has damaged companies a little bit, but I think it's a little bit more complicated than they want to make it. Because part of the issue with the Bud Light thing and the sales dropping is it wasn't so much that it was people that were anti-trans boycotting. It was just that your average person, they're for transgender rights. They just don't want to get involved. And so it's like, normally I'd order a Bud Light at the bar, but I don't want to get in a fucking conversation about this.
You think?
I do think that's what it is.
I honestly can't say that I've ever altered my order somewhere because of a conversation I wanted to avoid. And I am somebody who will try to avoid certain conversations because they sound like a headache. I will. Not about this topic in particular, but
no.
So I guess that's with me.
I think that's part of it, but I don't think that all the trans haters saying, well, we're not drinking Bud Light anymore is going to drop their sales by a third. I don't think there's enough of them. There's just not enough. I mean, honestly, you can't say that unless everybody who drinks Bud Light is anti-trans. In which case, Bud Light's marketing should have known that.
All right, so let me offer an idea. And this kind of just off the top of my head here, but so when I think of that particular beer and beers like it,
Sure.
I actually think about my home state, which is a red state. I grew up in North Dakota, and I think about these smaller places. When I think about these more liberal places, Portland, where you are, New York, where I am, I don't really think about people drinking like Bud Light. I think about people drinking microbrews and all of that kind of thing too. And so it also makes me think about where in general does this company have the most sales, and are they red states?
I don't know, and I think they're just trying to reach out to a bigger audience. When you talk about things like Bud Light or what was it, Pabst Blue Ribbon, and any of these cheap beers, you know what I always think of college students.
Sure.
$1 beer night, man. Fucking Bud Lights for $1. I mean,
but in these red states and smaller towns and such, these sort of less expensive beers that we think of as like the beer we drank in college,
right,
are the ones being consumed by people beyond those ages,
right?
As opposed to when we exited college,
sure,
we were still drinking beer at all, but we're drinking like a microbrewer.
Sure, and you could make the argument that, okay, so groups like Kohl's and Target and Bud Light are predominantly drank by people in red states because they're lower income in general. Right. You could make that argument.
I haven't looked at any actual data on
I
it.
don't.
But I mean,
I don't have
logic on it.
I don't have any data on it. I mean, we could speculate that. Right, I would also speculate that that's not entirely the problem. The problem is that it's become a political issue. So even if I were to go to the bar now and say, "Hey, I just want a Bud Light," I'd probably just say, "No, give me a Pabst," just so I don't have to fucking have the discussion. Because they're both equal. Because there's other options there, right?
So. Okay, so I wanna ask our audience below, because my mind is blown, and I'm totally willing for Duncan to be right. I have no stake in it either way, but I absolutely want you guys to tell us in the comments below.
Or email us if you think we're wrong, and come on the show, and we'll fucking talk about it.
Does this idea of Duncan's really seem to hold water? It's mind blowing to me that people would do this. So you should tell us in the comments below. But do you think people they really do this? Are they really not ordering a Bud Light when they normally would, just because they kind of don't want to end up in the conversation? That seems super weird to me.
I don't know. Let me look at this though. Because I wanted to talk about this, because when you look at this is just Gallup. Can you see these graphs okay, or are they a little too small?
They're a little small.
All right, let's see if I can, without screwing this up, let's see if I can do this.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, good. So this is just from Gallup. So they're looking at, do you think marriage between same-sex couples should or should not be recognized as law? And this is just from 96 to today, right? And the should be valid went from 27%. And here we skip forward, what is it, 28 years later? 26 years later. And 71%. Right? It's totally flipped.
Literally, because the should not be valid went from 68 down to 28. So almost literally the exact opposite. Almost to the number.
Yeah, completely flipped. And then this is just the raw numbers on that. Let me show this. Do you think marriage between same-sex couples? Yeah. What was it? How you feel about the state of the nation, each of the following areas for each one of these, blah, blah, blah. Very satisfied somewhat, blah, blah, blah. If you don't have, how about the acceptance of gays and lesbians in the nation? Right? Very satisfied to very dissatisfied, right? And you see that's kind of been consistent, but that question doesn't say if you're accepting or not. But gay and lesbian relationships, they think is morally acceptable, morally wrong, 25%, and that's recent. Now let's go back to 90, or this is just 2001. See, it went from 40 to 71% versus morally wrong, 53% to 25%. And that's in 21 years. It flipped, right? So you're seeing a huge difference and a giant acceptance now. And you can go through this whole thing later on if you guys want to. But what was this? Was there anything else in here that was interesting? No, not really. But I mean, that's all. That whole thing was actually really good. But you should check it out. But the whole thing is, that's the point, is it's changed. So I don't think that there's that many people, right, saying, oh man, I am so upset about a transgender person drinking a beer that I'm just not going to drink that brand anymore. I don't think that there's that significant amount of the population that it's going to knock their sales by 30%. That's a big fucking sales drop. I don't think that's what it was.
I would assume that, based on the percentages we see, roughly 30% are morally opposed. That would say all of them were Bud Light drinkers, and every single one of them stopped drinking Bud Light because of it.
Right, and you might be right that that's
the odds of that being
true.
That,
yeah, there's got to be some other factor, which was my argument.
I mean, it could be part of it. Maybe half of the people who were morally opposed were Bud Light drinkers and stopped it, or something. But it kind of seems like it couldn't be all of that. It has to be
it could be that they did that, and then after that, because most of the owners of Bud Light are Republican, they apologized to Bud Light, but they apologized to the Republican conservatives for having Dylan Mulvaney. It could be that they had a lot of trans Bud drinkers and gay Bud drinkers that went, don't apologize to them. Fuck you. I'm not drinking Bud Light anymore. I'm switching to Pabst.
Right. So here's another idea. Could it be more companies that are beer carrying companies that are owned by conservatives taking it upon themselves to at least maybe temporarily not be carrying it?
I don't think that's it. I think a lot of it, like the Kohl's stuff and the Target stuff, is I think a lot of it is just there is a lot of hatred around the LGBTQ stuff. There's a lot of like anti-trans bills coming out. Like we said, 400 anti-trans bills just this year. And I think a lot of people it's scary. In fact, gun ownership has gone up dramatically, mainly for trans and gay people, because they're scared. And so they're arming themselves, which makes sense when you think about it. I mean, and so it's one of those things where it's like, I can see where like your average normal person just is like, I don't even want to fucking, because I might run into some crazy person in a MAGA hat who's going to throw a fucking tantrum and start throwing beer in a grocery store. We saw that video. Right?
Yeah, that was weird.
Right, and I'm going to get assaulted because I'm drinking the wrong type of beer. I think that's more of what it is. It's more of, we just don't want to get involved because we don't want to be, it's the...
Yeah. Tell Alasius in the comments below, do you think this is real? I don't know. I'm not convinced, but I'm willing to be wrong.
Yeah. It just reminds me of the whole Nazi thing, right? Oh, they hate the Jews. They're starting to, come for the Jews and stuff. I'm just going to keep my head down because I don't want to get involved and get hurt. Right. And I don't want this, on my Facebook page, or I don't want to lose my job over some shit. Right. I can see where people are a little skittish about all that. But anyway, do you mind if I take a quick break? So anyway, the big topic for today, we're going to talk about immigration and racism. And I know a bunch of people are going to get upset and angry with this. So once again, our email is down below, gossipfinancead@hotmail.com. You can It's Outlook, sorry. Absolutely email us, and we'll have Outlook. But yeah, it's down below. Anyway, email us, and we'll have you on the show if you want, or you can call in and argue and yell at us here. None of you ever take us up, but maybe one of you will have, some guts. We'll see.
They don't want to make me cry, Duncan. That's what it is.
It's so sad. Anyway, so
some of them might want to make you cry, though.
Yeah, that would be fun.
That feels real, right?
I'm here for you. Anyway, so kind of this is been a problem in economics for years. Is that you just not a lot of research has been done on race in economics or sexism in economics or any of that stuff. Part of that is most people in economics and finance, as you and I well know, are white men.
We don't really want to shed light on the fact that we have an advantage over basically everybody.
I don't know that it's that so much as just they don't have that perspective, so it doesn't really occur. I don't think it's sinister necessarily, but it is something that happens. So we're going to look at this a little bit. So part of what we're going to look at is the immigration problem. It's not a problem. It's how we deal with immigration is a problem. And we really need to fix a lot of that. But part of what happened was in Florida, they had these really draconian immigration laws. And we're going to take a look at that. But immigrants, we did a video with the immigrants when they initially passed the laws, which I think come into play in July. Immigrants just decided, we're not going to go to work today in Florida. And Florida kind of seemed to have forgotten that 20% of its workforce are immigrants. And so pretty much Florida shut down. There were no groceries on the shelves, no one on the farms picking the farm, there weren't any Uber drivers, nobody was working construction, a lot of restaurants had to shut down.
Well, and the NAACP came out with their statement against traveling to Florida
because they said it's anti-immigrant, anti-black, anti-LGBT.
They said it was anti-everything.
Yeah, and they gave good reason for it. But here's we're going to look at MSNBC here real quick. Just a quick story they did. And this is just from their blog. This is from Joy Reid's blog, but we're going to look at this little bit right here. Let me turn up the volume and we'll get him going. Come on, buddy. There we go.
By the Florida legislature this week. Governor Ron DeSantis, who proposed some of the provisions in this bill, is expected to sign it into law. We met with one of the people here in Miami whose life will be directly impacted by the changes to this immigration policy in the state of Florida. Take a listen. El mejor cafecito? No doubt. 35-year-old Julio Calderon is an entrepreneur who calls Miami home. Y buenas barberías and good barbershops. Sona Barbershop in Little Havana is where Julio has been getting his shave and a haircut for years. He graduated from Florida International University with a degree in economics, and now he's using that degree to help small businesses, like this Miami bakery, where he helped increase their online presence. I recommend the pequeños. They also have one that has cheese and one that has guava. But all of this could soon change now that the Florida legislature passed a new immigration bill that will have a direct impact on the estimated 775,000 undocumented immigrants who live in Florida. People like Julio. Julio came here from Honduras right after he turned 16. He didn't qualify for DACA. The fear of deportation. It's real. I can give more to this country, right? And I want to give more. The legislation would impose harsher penalties for transporting undocumented immigrants into Florida, invalidate driver's licenses given to people who can't prove their legal status, prohibit undocumented migrants from becoming certified lawyers, require employers with more than 25 employees to use E-Verify, allocate $12 million in the next fiscal year to send migrants out of Florida, and require hospitals that accept Medicaid to ask admitted patients for their immigration status and report that data to the state. Now,
that's just hideous to me. Now, you could sit there and say, well, they're undocumented. I'm like, okay, I want to clarify this because this was something that came up with some of our comments on the last time, was they kept saying illegal immigrants. And I'm like, what do you mean? You mean they're criminals? And what they really were talking about is undocumented immigrants. And I want to clarify this. Being in this country without documentation is not a crime. You can be deported for it, but you can't be criminally charged. You have not committed any crime.
You just don't have a legal status in the country, which is different from it being illegal.
Right.
You have to kind of note a difference between that. Literally based on linguistics, I think there's confusion sometimes about what that means.
Well, let me give you a simple example. If I assault somebody, that's a crime. I can be criminally charged and do jail time. If I park my car in a no parking zone, that's a civil violation. It's not a crime. I can't be arrested for that. I pay a fine. If I don't pay the fine, then they can sue me and take the money from me. But it's not a crime. So in the sense of he's undocumented, he's still working legally. He's paying taxes, right? Which most undocumented workers are. What they are is they're in a status that they're trying to get documentation, and that can take years. So they're sort of in limbo. So when you start putting these sort of restrictions on it, you're making it impossible for them to work or function or get health care or do anything. Even though these people are not here illegally, they haven't committed any crime, right?
Let's also add to it that frequently they're children.
Yeah.
Being a teacher in the South Bronx, I have had many students that don't have papers. Now, some I'm aware of and some I would not be. People don't flash that information. But, what's sad is when people want to get hardcore about, deportation and all of that, I would like them to stop and remember that some of these people are children. And I've been in scenarios. I remember particularly I had a student one year that was one semester from graduating, but based on things that were happening with DACA and some, fear during that point around that administration, they were terrified to come to school.
Right.
And I don't know, they might have had to do some sort of correspondence summer school, sort of something to try to get to graduation because they were so petrified they wouldn't come to school. Mm-hmm. And school is not a place that, they could be taken from even necessarily. School is a safe place, but it doesn't change that fear is used against undocumented people, right, even in places where they technically, could not be given problems.
Right. And part of the issue that I want to kind of examine here is it's not just, okay, you pass these draconian laws and stuff, you do create a lot of fear and you create a lot of problems. And I empathize with them saying, you know what, forget it. We're just not going to show up to work today. If you're going to threaten us, then why are we showing up to work? Why are we building your homes and picking your food and delivering your food? And why are we doing all that? Right? Why are we opening businesses? Why are we spending our money here? Why are we doing anything? Right? If you're not going to include us. And just historically speaking, we can cover this next time a little bit more. This country is built on immigrants. The Irish, the Spanish, the Italians, and all the shit they went through to get here. Not to mention the Chinese and the Japanese and all the shit they went through to get here. We used to have a law called the Chinese Exclusion Act.
That's racist even by title.
No, but that's just how it goes. But a lot of this also blends into this concept of racism and how it bleeds into sort of economic thinking and how it has in the past is this idea that somehow these groups are inferior or they're lazy or they don't work as hard, so they're a burden, right? Or the immigrants are coming to take your jobs and shit like that, but they're lazy. I mean, it gets confusing, right? So I just wanted to look at here's a quick article from, I think this one's from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. And they just talk about race and racism and economics. If you haven't, it's an older article from the 2020, but it's really good. But it's pretty basic. But they go back to this. So the field of economics has been far from immune from discrimination and racism. George Stigler in 1982, he won the Nobel Prize. But he used to argue in the 65 that black people were inferior as workers and that the solution was fostering willingness to work hard. Right?
Well, gee, that doesn't sound a lot like slavery.
Well, but how many times do we do this?
What? Like, not work hard? Are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah, but that's the point.
The jobs that they were crammed into, even post-slavery, I know I'm just making a little commentary there, but even post that era, look at the kinds of jobs that they sort of got stuck with. They were nothing but very, very difficult.
Well, but think about this. So, like, was it Oklahoma City? No, it was Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? And there was, after the Civil War, there was Tulsa was mostly black. And you had doctors and lawyers. And, I mean, they had a whole freaking city. It was predominantly black and black-owned businesses, right? And then what happened? A bunch of white people came in and they had planes and stuff, and this was like in 1910 or whatever, and they pushed all the black people out and just took their shit and put in a white government. The only coup on American soil, I can look this up, I didn't even think about this before, I should have. I can't even remember where it was basically the KKK moved into a town, pushed all the black people out. So to sit there and say they're lazy and they're not good workers, no, there was a time when they were doing really well in the early 20th century. And then we got suppressed, and then we imposed segregation and all that shit. And then it made it really hard. But it's not like they weren't working. That's the stupid part of this. And you can't say that about, like, okay, this group works harder than this group. It's just a stupid thing to say. There's always going to be some lazy shits in every group. So you can pull out anecdotes till the end of time. I know a butt ton of lazy Asian and white people. And yet we always seem to be the top of the heap. Right? As somebody who's both. Right? But it's not the reality. I mean, the reality is that's true, but statistically, but a lot of that's because a lot of Asian and white people come from money. They come from
starting with the advantage,
right?
Starting from a better lot.
And when I say Asian, I mean East Asian. I don't mean Pacific Islander. Those guys have it harder. But how hard? I want to stick to that phrase: the willingness to work hard. They don't have it. How often do we hear that statement or something similar to that? People are just lazy. They don't believe in effort. They don't believe in.
That doesn't sound like any of the things we bring on this show, does it?
Every week? Like no. We've never heard that before from Fox News or Dave Ramsey or CNBC. We've never heard that, except for every fucking week.
They need to buckle down and work harder.
That's why I wanted to show you that, Lace, because we do this. Every week we hear that, and we kept doing the joke about, they think that, it's a Worthington's Law that wealth equals better than and all this shit. But we didn't realize this is rooted in fucking racism from the 20th century. This is deeply rooted in racism from the 20th century. And it's moved on, and I want to go through the rest of this article because they kind of talk about academics has moved on from this shit. So, like, here's a good example. Race and topics. Race, in the red here, gender, poverty, income distribution, right, versus capital asset pricing, market liquidity, and monetary policy. These are the topics of most articles. The ones that are the least talked about in finance and economics.
They're the systemic issues.
Right. And it's interesting about that. So
the only topics they really want to talk about are, scroll back up to that.
Yeah. Hang on a second. Yeah, go ahead.
So capital asset pricing, market liquidity, monetary policy. So they want to go ahead and attack these what you can do with your money topics, but they don't want to attack any this isn't really a do, it's a systemic thing.
Or what do you do if you don't have money issues? Because of these problems.
Not that either. They're not touching anything systemic, and they're certainly not touching the if you actually just don't have it. The things that they're touching are what you actually can do, and if you already are in a have category.
Right, exactly. So they were looking at this in economics institutions, academics, and policymaking. Like the first steps is to create a safe environment to talk about these things: racism, raise awareness, provide mandatory bias training, including those that are unconscious. Rooting out discrimination starts by acknowledging that a problem exists. That's a great sentence. We have to acknowledge that there's we have to acknowledge
there are systemic problems.
Right. You can't start curing your cancer until you acknowledge I have cancer.
Well, we haven't been saying that for weeks and weeks and weeks, have we?
No. So, Ijeoma Oluo, I hope I pronounced it right, in her 2019 New York Times bestseller, So You Want to Talk About Race, that we filter information through our own experiences to assess the validity of biases. So she's basically saying the same thing I did, which is race is, like she says, race is not a universal experience. So if you have a bunch of white guys writing these papers, they're probably not going to think of it. Right? So their whole point is to make progress, economists need to further broaden their perspective. Right? We need to start looking at this in a larger way. And it's starting to happen. And they talk a little bit more about like Black Lives has really kind of pushed economics into this forefront of, well, maybe we should look at how race really does affect these people, especially when you get that many people, fighting us, right, in protesting in the streets. But I want to look at one more thing. So let's see. So there's that. So just so you can see how it applies to racism, because I know some of you are going to argue, well, that doesn't seem that it's racist. It's just people don't want to work and they're lazy. And it's like, no, here's how it applies directly. And once again, if you want to argue, email me. We will have you on the show if you want to argue with us. I'd like to see somebody with the balls to finally do it. Here we go. Labor force participation. So I just pulled this from BLS reports, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, right? So labor participation has actually been pretty good overall. It's gotten better and better with lots of different groups, right? However, education attainment. White people tend to get bachelor's degrees. The gray here. Can you see that well enough?
Yep.
So white people tend to get bachelor's degrees more. Associate's degrees have low dropout rates. Black people, less likely to get a bachelor's degree.
So that's the second row there.
Yep. Asians, oh my gosh, almost all of us, right? Like almost 70% of us, 68%, get a bachelor's degree or higher. And our less than high school is almost nothing. Hispanic and Latino, very small. So there's still racial inequity in college there, right? And in education. Because the light blue here is high school graduation, which oddly is higher for African Americans, but it's really low for Latinos, right? So I'm going to skip down here, but here's where it gets it. Unemployment. White people, very low. Asian people, very low. Black people, almost double what it is for white and Asians. American Indian, Native American, Alaskan Native, pretty high. Hawaiian.
I have to say that one doesn't surprise me with the whole reservation situation. I mean,
Yep.
you know, they didn't put a lot of opportunities out there for them.
Yeah, but who's the highest? Black people.
Yeah.
So when they sit there and go, okay, well, wait a second, it's because you're not working hard, right? And then I can go, well, wait, black people have the highest unemployment rate, so they must be the most lazy. They must be the ones that aren't willing to work. That was the thinking in the 60s and the 70s. And that's a lot of what goes on still today. You'll still hear people do what's called 1350. And what they're talking about is black people are only 13% of the population, but they get tagged for like 50% of the crimes. Well, is that because they're over-policed as a race? Or is that because black people are just more criminal? Is it because black people had to deal with slavery and then segregation and have only really had civil rights to a degree, because there's still a lot of voting rights issues and things like that that target black people? Has it been that they've been oppressed for so long they can't get ahead financially, so they're more apt to be in a position to be lower income and commit crimes because they're desperate for money? Could that be it? Or is it just because there's something wrong with black people? That's the difference in the argument. The right, the conservatives, they're saying, well, they're just lazy, they're not willing to work. There's something wrong with them. So then what I can say is, look, and you'll love this because you've taught Martin Luther King, and he hated the I Had a Dream speech. He denounced it after he did it because this is what happened. People start saying, well, we judge people not by the color of their skin, but the contents of their character. And since black people commit all the crimes and have the highest unemployment rate, black people must have bad character. So I'm not being racist when I say that, because I'm not judging them by their skin, by their character. Not acknowledging that that situation is caused by, I don't know, centuries of systemic oppression, and that it's been impossible for them to make money and get ahead and collect generational wealth like white people. Do you see how easy that is to make that correlation and ignore the causation completely? That's the problem we keep running into with this, well, if you're poor, it's because you're lazy. That's an old racism trope. And that's why Martin Luther King Jr. later on denounced that shit and said, hey, I that dream I had became a nightmare, because that's what all these fucking racists did with it. They took it, ran with it. That's why when you hear people on Fox News and stuff, well, aren't we past racism? Martin Luther King Jr. said, and they only have the one quote. They never quote his, where do we go from here? They never quote his last book. They never quote anything else. They never acknowledge that he wrote or said anything else.
They never quote anything from Letter from Birmingham Jail.
Right. Yeah, according to Martin Luther King.
Letter from Birmingham Jail, King said,
Yeah. They never, no, it's just Martin Luther King Jr. once said, I have a dream, and that's it, and he never said anything else. So that's where it turns into sort of systemic racism about if you're not rich or you haven't succeeded, it's because you're just not trying hard enough. Well, that's easy when you've oppressed somebody for so long, and then you tell them you're not trying hard enough. It's literally, I'm sitting down with a fixed deck, and we're playing poker, and I keep asking you about why aren't you winning? I already rigged the game so I can win. And you keep losing, and I'm like, well, it must be because you're a loser. Because there's something wrong with you. No. So that's kind of my take on that. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that, or you should have it. But I want to look at this real quick. Robert Reich talks about the same issue in economics, because this has been a big thing now. Or not now, but in the last decade or so. But watch him do this.
I keep hearing no one wants to work anymore. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, corporate America's biggest lobbying group, claims there are over 10 million job openings right now in the United States for which employers can't find workers. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says the U.S. is dealing with a structural labor shortage. But here's the truth. There is no labor shortage. There is, however, a shortage of jobs paying sufficient wages to attract workers to fill them. When a problem is wrongly described, the solutions posed often turn out to be equally wrong. For most Americans, real inflation-adjusted wages continue to drop. Any pay increases workers may have earned in the past few years have actually been pay cuts because wages have lagged behind the rising costs of basic necessities like housing, food, childcare, and healthcare. Now, you don't have to be a financial wizard to see why some workers might say, the hell with it. So, what should be done about the difficulty employers are having finding workers? Simple. If employers want more workers, they should pay them more. Many corporations are...
And he's right. That's it.
So, in other words, we don't want your shitty-ass job. We don't want your shitty-ass job. You know, I once made a joke to somebody that I won't say the dollar amount because that's almost arbitrary, but I said, if it's not more than blank dollars an hour, it's not worth me putting pants on for.
Right.
I mean, and that's kind of true. And we want to complain about people not wanting to work, but the truth of the matter is actually having a job isn't completely free to you.
No.
You have to transport yourself to it. If you have children, you have to make sure your children are covered. And if you don't have family that can just grab your kids from school and whatever, like you have to do all of that. Like, there's actually costs to having a job.
Right.
And quite frankly, at certain wages, it doesn't even pay to put pants on.
No.
You might as well just be at home. Nobody wants your shitty job.
No. No, not at all.
And put your jobs that don't tend to have much future either, unless you're just dying to be in management in whichever business it is.
Yeah.
You know, you're not really working very far up. Maybe you can become a manager of whichever sort of company it is, but otherwise it's just a shitty ass job. And then when you work your way into management, you kind of get stuck there. You can't really do much else.
Yeah. Then you get stuck in all the salary problems where you have to work extra hours and all that shit.
Right, right. And then you're actually working for less, even though you're having more in terms of your salary, but they just like, well, now you can just work 80 hours a week. That's great.
Yeah, pretty much. I agree with you completely. I think that he's right. And I think the problem is that, once again, you can't say it's because of generation, or you can't say it's because of a race, or you can't say it's because of immigrants. The bottom line is you have a job shortage because you're not paying. Right, and we'll get into a little bit more of that in a second. But I want to.
They want a living wage.
Yep.
They want some health insurance.
But let's hear the opposite of Robert Reich. Let's hear from a guy who has no real education.
Oh no.
Dave Ramsey. He has a bachelor's degree in finance, or he claims he does. But here we go. You ready to go?
No.
No, you're not. You need.
I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
Lacey's like, I need to smoke some weed first.
Not even my thing.
The jobs numbers are out. So I'm aware of those numbers because we had been talking about them an hour or two ago, actually off air. And then the guy calls in and he's working part-time and he doesn't have the money to fix an engine in his car, and he's got a 19% interest rate and he needs to get rid of the car. And all I can talk about is get a job, get a job, get a job. And that's not because I'm a heartless jerk. It's because, dude, you can fall off a log, you can get a job right now. The jobs numbers are, you can be dumber than a log and get a job right now.
That's true. I will agree with that. That's true. I can go get a job right now at Taco Bell.
I like burritos, so I'd be into the shift meal, but I wouldn't be into the rest of it. That shift meal wouldn't be worth putting pants on for.
Yeah. But, yep, I could go get a job at Taco Bell, but would it pay enough? That's the question, right? I can go get a job right now working at a grocery store. Would it pay enough? Would I get benefits? And then if I have a decent paying job now, even if it's part-time, how is that going to interfere with my current job that actually pays well? So wouldn't I rather work part-time for more money? So he's not addressing the issue. Yeah, you can get a job. Sure, I can get a job digging ditches. I can go stand outside Home Depot and get paid $40 a day to spend 8 hours digging ditches at $5 an hour. I could do that, but is it worth it? No.
Not worth putting pants on, man.
Plus, especially with those kind of physical jobs, what if I get hurt? Medical bill is going to be a lot more than what I can make. So he's not thinking practically. It's just, yeah, you can get a job. Anybody can get a job, sure.
Again, he's thinking from his position, and in his position, he's got a lot of advantages, and he's very naive to anybody who does not have the advantages that he has, and arguably has always had. He loves to say that he was a millionaire and then he lost everything, but he didn't lose everything to the, working a minimum wage job point,
No. And
it was not fair. And I don't want to discount having lost your whole fortune, because I'm pretty sure that's a bad few days right there. But
it wasn't.
Didn't go back to minimum wage.
But it wasn't his fortune. He was over leveraged in loans. That wasn't his property. It was the bank's.
That's true. That's true.
So for him to sit there and say, I was a millionaire. No, you owned all these properties, but in loans you owned a lot more.
Right.
Because he got most of that shit forgiven in bankruptcy. They seized all the properties, took him.
Against loan forgiveness.
Yep. I also want to talk, because he bitches about this. Well, we were poor growing up, right? We had it tough. And he talked about when he was 10, back in whatever it was, 72. And I have the Larry King interview, and we'll go through it one day, because it's hilarious. Because it's like near the end of Larry King's career, and you can tell Larry King is just checked out. Larry King's trying to figure out what the baseball scores are while they're doing the interview, right? It's pretty funny. But Dave Ramsey says he's talking about being poor growing up, and his father only made whatever it was, $17,000 a year or something back in 72. And so I was like, I was curious. So I went and looked it up. You know what the median wage was in 72? It was like $6 or $7 grand. So his dad was making almost triple median wage. And in today's dollars, his father would have been making at $17,000 a year in 72. Today's dollars, that's equivalent to about $180,000 or $190,000 a year. So dad's making almost $200K, and you're bitching about how poor you grew up. Audience members watching this, people doubting us, whatever, raise your hand if your dad made around $200K. Or even $150K 20 years ago when you were growing up, or whatever it was.
I had 4 parents, and I think combined they probably
didn't make $200K.
I mean, I don't actually know, because I haven't looked at their, tax returns, but I'm gonna bet, at least not while they were raising me.
Nope. My dad was a criminal lawyer. He wasn't making $200K. Making close, but he wasn't making that much. And I don't sit around and go, man, it was so hard. We were so poor when I was growing up. It was so tough. I'm like, no, fuck no. I never went hungry as a kid. I never had to worry about whether or not we had a home. When I went to college, I didn't really have to worry about, hey, if I need money, can I call mom and dad? Never was a fucking worry for me. So no, I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, I pulled myself up from the bootstraps and never got any help. Got a lot of fucking help. Which makes me different than all these other financial dipshits telling you how hard it was for them, because it wasn't. A lot of them had it easier than I did, and I had it pretty fucking easy. So let's not gild the lily too much here. All right, let's watch some more of this.
Because the jobs numbers are It's bizarre what's happening out there in the economy.
Record numbers. So the June Labor Department report came out Monday, and we've got 10 million plus jobs open, available right now in the United States. And you compare that to 8.7 million people that are still unemployed, many choosing to be unemployed. They're still getting the federal unemployment benefits that are set to expire on Labor Day.
No, they're not getting them. They are already expired for most of these people. For that 8.6 million, they are not getting unemployment benefits because 7 million of them left the workforce over a year or two ago. So they're not getting shit. They might be getting food stamps or something like that, but they're not getting anything else. Right? So that's a whole fucking lie. These people are not getting a ton of benefits. So I just want to put a flag in that. I don't know. You look like you're falling asleep there. You did I lose you?
Yeah, I just got nothing on that one.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you're just like, yeah. Lacey's like, can't we just fucking skip through this video, Duncan?
Yeah, I mean, I just can't even handle hearing him say this anymore. To be honest with you, I'm like, oh god, again.
Well, let's give him another minute.
Ironically enough.
Wait a minute. So, wait a minute. The unemployment ends on Labor Day.
Yeah.
So maybe it's time to start planning to labor.
Yeah.
Sometime before then.
Yeah. And the opportunities are endless, Dave. 10 million plus jobs. Now, here's some good news in this job report, because you hear a lot of doom and gloom. So the Ramsey Show is going to give you
skip through some of this shit.
Really jumpstart your life.
It's better than $800 a month,
Sitting
$10,000
at home.
a year, which is what he was making. So that was my point. Is there's 8.7 million people unemployed. There's 10 million jobs. It sounds like we don't have any unemployment. It just sounds like we have people not working.
That's exactly what it is.
There's a difference.
And what a great time to go get hired right now. My goodness. Employers will throw jobs at you, to your point earlier.
Yeah. I mean, we're in the process of hiring. Now, we're in a different league.
Yes.
Because of the type of elite person we're looking for at Ramsey Solutions. But
elite, my ass.
Okay, let me retrieve my eyeballs from how far into the back of my head they are right now.
Elite. Nobody there even has a fucking license in finance.
It just have to be Christian.
No one's ever worked in finance.
We'll decide to memorize all of the Ramsey protocol.
Yeah, none of the personalities there have ever held a license, worked in finance, worked with a client. None of them have any background or education in finance. The only one who does is Dave, and he claims he has a finance degree from University of Tennessee. But if that's the case, it's in corporate finance. It's not in personal finance. So he's not qualified to be talking about any of this shit anyway. So, I mean, on top of the fact, what's the big theme? Well, look, all these jobs, people just don't want to work. They just need to have a willingness to work. Why aren't these lazy people willing to work?
Sounds like that 1920s, racist.
1960s.
Everything.
Yep. 60s and 70s. It was even closer than yeah. You're talking 50 years ago. You're not talking a century ago. So there's that, but that's kind of, but you see that permeates, and then people hear that and they think, oh yeah, it's just that people are lazy. And it's like, no, there's other problems, and there are solutions. Like Robert Wright said, just pay people more. There's a solution. Let's increase the safety net so people don't have to worry about making more money. Right? Make it easier, right? Make sure people have health care and things like that. They're going to be more apt to go to work. Because right now, it's like if you are on Medicaid and you've got kids, let's say, right? Or even if you're single, it doesn't matter. I could go take that shitty job at Taco Bell and take another shitty job somewhere else and work, 2 full-time jobs. But now I've lost my Medicaid. So,
and it doesn't make me enough money to actually cover my own insurance needs.
Right. So now if I get sick, I'm really fucked. And I'm back in the system again.
And my child care. So I can take these 2 shitty jobs, never see my kids, and all I can do is pay for child care and the insurance that is not going to cover as much as what my previous insurance did.
Right. And then when one of my unsupervised kids eventually gets sick or breaks a leg or something like that, now I have to pay that all out of pocket. So now I owe the hospital $25,000 that I can't pay. And I'm never going to pay off because at the interest rate, I'm just going to be able to afford the interest, and that's it. Right. So now I'm really fucked. When if I'd have just not taken those jobs, right, and the kid got injured, Medicaid could have picked all that up. And we'd be in a much better position because we wouldn't have that extra debt. He's not thinking about this financially. He's thinking about it from his own bigoted backwards point of view, which is if you're poor, it's because you're lazy. It's got to be that. It cannot be anything else. There cannot be any answer other than that. And so I just want to close real quick with this. So Bill Burr is a famous comedian. He has a podcast, and we can just listen to it. We don't have to click it because it's not going to do much. But he takes a call from a guy bitching about this, which I think is funny.
To cancel it out, and it allegedly resets your.
So this is Bill Burr. Sorry.
Not as loud. Of course, it's not approved over here yet. I don't know if it works.
He's talking about something else right now. Sorry, we'll get to it in a second here.
Anyway, here we go. Work. Hey, Bill, huge fan. Can't wait for Old Dads. I've been telling everyone about it when the topic of new movies come up. Oh, yeah, I think it's good. I'm really, really proud of you. I own a restaurant that my grandparents started in the early 70s. We're always staffed with younger kids looking for jobs or adults looking for part-time work. We've been understaffed due to the last few years' events and are struggling to stay operational. We'll survive because it's all we have, and we'll make it in the long run. But finding people to work in our area has been very difficult. We pay almost double the server base, and our kitchen positions have had 2 times minimum wage since the 90s. I agree corporations are slimy and are probably feeling the backlash to their inhumanity. But aside from that, it's been clear that younger people are not eager to work. I just think that waiting tables to them is like churning butter. When you can, it used to be if you're a good-looking chick, you become a waitress, you make money making tips. It's like, well, why do I want to do that when I can just go on, like, Instagram and be like, oh, God, yeah, I guess jazz, and, kind of stick your finger in your mouth a little bit.
Kind of a sexist thing to say, but...
Whatever the fuck it is. How chicks do on the internet.
Yeah, that was a little sexist, but he's getting to a point where, look, he's not exactly PC. That's not his spiel. I'm not defending him or anything. That was pretty horrible. But he's getting to a point where he's trying to explain it's probably not attractive to work at your restaurant anymore because kids have other opportunities, and that's kind of what he's getting to. He's just doing it in a stupid way.
I think that's what it is. They have. It's not that they're not working. I mean, they obviously are working. How are they paying their rent? So I think they're working. I just think old people like us don't really know what the new jobs are. It can't all be in entertainment. I feel like they're like everybody else. They're always on their phone and they're always consuming content. So I imagine they're trying to get into that world because that's the world they enjoy. If I was a younger person, I would probably want to get involved in creating video games, make an app, get in shape, and I'll just be your fucking personal trainer through the internet, and then I can be at home. I think maybe like the combination of that, maybe, and like also they just sort of Postmate foods. And no one goes to like malls anymore. I don't know. I'm too far.
I give credit. He's like, I don't know. I'm too old to know the difference, right? But it seems to me that the market's changed.
Well, let's also be honest. I don't know exactly what jobs they're all doing, but even the high school students that I teach, there's a summer youth program that they get hired for, and the scope of that has changed. A lot of these kids that got these summer youth jobs, their jobs online.
Oh, yeah.
Via remote.
Yeah.
So like the landscape has changed, and a lot of them are not going for your server job anymore. They're like, oh, I can get this sort of computery job. And they were born with cell phones and iPads and various laptops like right in front of them. So it's not like in our generation where we had to like learn this. I mean, they had to learn it, but they were so much younger when they were learning how to use it. They've been basically using it forever, you know?
Well,
it's
right.
second nature to them. So out of the gate jobs for them, they're probably still entry-level types of jobs, but they're entry-level types of jobs where they're doing things with computers and things, you know?
Well, no, and I don't disagree. I mean, so like, I know I'm going to age us a little bit here, but it's like, yeah, you didn't really get into that in high school, computers and stuff. That wasn't.
No.
Yeah, so
Not to college.
Yeah, I was a couple of years younger than Lacey, but my generation was the first generation where, yeah, we started doing computers in grade school. But we were the first generation to do that, right? But you got to understand the shit we grew up with and were trained to do in grade school, middle school, high school, those eras, and then college even. Yeah, it's nothing compared to today's technology. That shit, I mean, the stuff we learned on was, I mean, it looks like the Flintstones compared to today's stuff. You know, it's just amazing to me. It's like, yeah, but that's, I mean, I remember, you know, I'm so old. I remember I used to have to go. I spent most nights at the library because that's how we did research. Because you couldn't trust shit you got off the internet. You couldn't verify it.
Yeah, that's true. You kind of had to go to the library and
print it off.
Find a book.
And photocopy the pages.
Or use the microfiche.
Oh my god, fucking microfiche. I hated that.
I found it really complicated. It was really complicated to try to figure out. I was terrible at doing research because it was really hard to literally find the stuff in the microfiche and like navigate all that.
Oh yeah. Most kids, you guys don't know what it smells like to be in a Stax. It hasn't.
As we're talking about it, I'm having a sensory memory
of that old paper smell. It's so it's so pungent. You can't miss it. Anyway, just to look at, but he's got a good point about this. Okay.
No, I have to digress. I just want those younger members of our audience to know bookworms are actually a thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but they're not really. They're mealworms. Yeah.
Yes.
If they don't take care of the books, if you don't keep it dry enough, yeah, mealworms will get into that paper.
Yes, it's real. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I really needed to say that. It was very important.
Especially that old cotton parchment shit. Yeah. Anyway, so he did make a good.
I have out of my nostrils all night now.
Yeah. The good point he made is this: is once again, it's not that people aren't working. So here's Bureau of Labor Statistics again. Employment population ratio 16 to 19. What you see here, though, is this huge dip in the early 2000s. Do you see that, Lacey? Is that too small?
It's kind of too small.
Let's see if I can we get it bigger? Let's do this. There we go. There we go.
It felt better.
Much better. So in the early 2000s, you see this huge dip, right? 16 to 19. You see it too here with 2024. Not so much with 25 to 54, but you see that big dip. You know what that was? That was the boom in people going to college. Even though college was getting more and more expensive, it got even drastically more expensive after that. But more and more people were going to college because most new jobs required a college degree or some trade school or something. Right? So a lot of these younger people didn't do that. The other thing that Lacey pointed out earlier, which was a great point, is your biggest time of year when people like 16 to 24 work, especially 16 to 20, is summer. They take summer jobs. Right? So this guy calling in with this restaurant going, well, we hire a lot of younger people. And it's like, well, yeah. And I'll bet you in the summer, it's not a big issue. But at the same time, let's be realistic. There's high turnover with young people. This is not their career. They're not staying there for 5 years. Maybe a year, maybe 2. Right? So I think Bill Burr's got a good point, which is, yeah, but the difference is now they have other options. So what are you offering that makes it your job more attractive than, oh, I'll just Uber, or I'll just get a job on, I'll try to make money on Instagram or whatever, right? So just to say that, just to tie that all in with the race and the immigrants, but also with young people too, where it's like you get this sort of bias where it's just they're just lazy and they don't want to work. It's not the case. They do. And a lot of them do. They just don't want to take your shitty ass jobs anymore.
You stole my line. I feel like the name of this whole sequence is "We don't want your shitty ass job."
Well, but
we don't want a job. We don't want your shitty ass job.
Well, but here's the thing: though, is a lot of immigrants, because they're new here and because they're just trying to get started, they will take your shitty ass job. The problem is you don't want immigrants here. That's why you're passing all these bills to make it impossible for them to work.
And then getting pissed off
that nobody's working.
That not immigrants that don't want your shitty ass
job and don't want to work. Why? Because they didn't grow up in that society, right? Because if I grew up in Venezuela and I was super poor and I got here and Taco Bell offered me $15 an hour, I'd be fucking ecstatic. But I grew up in America, so Taco Bell offered me $15 an hour. I'm going to sit there and go, I think I can do better. Or if not, I'm just going to suck it up and take my benefits. Instead of risking losing my benefits to go work at fucking Taco Bell. Right? So you create the problem and then you ask, why is there a problem? It's once again, I have a fixed deck and I deal out the cards for poker to Lacey. And Lacey keeps losing. And I'm like, why do you keep losing, Lacey? What's your problem? It's a fixed game. That's the problem. I know the answer.
Yep. That's it.
Pretending like I don't. Well, anyway, that was kind of our show for today. So where can everybody catch you, Lacey?
As always, you can catch me for blog posts and information about workshops and course offerings at mysensewithsense.com. If you want to write in about any courses or workshop offerings, or you want to come on the show and take Duncan up on the offer he likes to make you every week, you can feel free to email us at, where is that?
gossipfinancead@outlook.com. I got it right this time. It's down there below in the information.
We're not at Hotmail.
No, not at Hotmail. Outlook.
Outlook.
Thanks everybody for